你们这些禽兽不如的畜生！
把他抓回去！好。
Hey guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you are doing well. It is a Friday afternoon here in Los Angeles. I'm having a good day. I hope you're having a good day as well. If you're new to the channel, welcome and thanks for finding us. I hope you like this video. I hope you like martial arts movies, Hong Kong cinema, old school martial arts films, boutique Blu-ray labels, all that other fun stuff that we talk about on the channel. If you are new and you're not subscribed, you could subscribe. That would be a huge help. Only if you feel so inclined. Give us a comment. Let me know what you think about this movie, about this release, which releases in 2024 you're most excited for. What your favorite old school martial arts movies are, what your favorite independent martial arts movies are, what your favorite Golden Harvest martial, whatever you feel like commenting about, let me know in the comments what you feel like talking about. So let's just jump into this video, and a shout out to our patrons as always, because they are amazing. And I was just working on some Patreon exclusive content, and I'm always excited to do that stuff. So today we're talking about When Taekwondo Strikes, and I have the press release here, which I know people sometimes enjoy seeing, so I'll throw that up for you there. So this is the press release from Eureka Entertainment. And this is a film from 1973. It was directed by Huang Feng. It ran in theaters in Hong Kong from the 12th of September until the 21st of September, 1973. It made about $1 million Hong Kong dollars at the box office on June 22nd of 2024. Or excuse me, June. It comes out in 6 months. We're reviewing a little bit early. On January 22nd of 2024, Eureka Entertainment will drop a limited first run Blu-ray, 2,000 copies with the slipcase and the booklet and all the bells and whistles and stuff like that. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'll be reviewing the movie. This is the first watch for me, and then I'll talk about the bonus material that's on here. There's one particular thing that I think people are really, really excited about. And when I mentioned that I was watching this release in my Facebook group recently, someone in the comments was like, "Oh, how's that thing? Is it good? Is it like, whatever." So I'll talk about that in a minute. But Angela Mao is in this movie and is freaking amazing in this movie. Huang Feng, who directed this, also directed Hapkido, I believe, and Lady Whirlwind, which are the two Angela Mao movies that are in the Angela Mao double feature that Eureka released, I think, a year or two. When did that come out? Was that 2 years ago? Was that fall of 2022? That release was awesome. I loved those movies, and I loved this movie. This was my first Hong Kong movie of 2024, and it was my first Hong Kong first watch of 2024, and it was perfect for both of those things. Like, I loved this movie. At one point I was going to pause it to go and get a snack, and I was like, well, let me just get through like the next 10 minutes. And then I was like, well, I'll just get to the next 10 minutes. And I never paused it. I did not pause this movie at all, which, as I'm sure like everyone listening to this or watching this or whatever knows, like, in the era of smartphones, even for people like me who, I didn't have a smartphone until I was in my 30s, right? Like, you spent your whole life up until that point watching movies without pausing them. It's really hard to watch a movie without pausing it in the smartphone era. And I got through this whole movie without pausing it once. It was so good. I loved this movie. It's about an hour and 40 minutes, like an hour 35. So it stars Angela Mao, Jun Rhee, Carter Huang, Sammo Hung is in this movie. Sammo Hung is also the fight choreographer, action director, whatever you want to call it for this film. Huang In-shik, who's in Dragon Lord, right? Who's just like a legendary badass. Kim Ki-ju and Anne Winton, who is a white woman who I don't think I had ever even heard of before, never seen in a movie before, and she is kicking all kinds of ass in this movie, which is like really unexpected. So let me tell you the plot of this movie. There's a karate school. It takes place in Korea, and there's a karate school I think it's in Seoul, in this city in Korea. I think it's Seoul. Where it's actually like it's a front for the Japanese secret services, essentially, which is like the Japanese Gestapo, more or less, and like the Japanese invasion of Korea. And they are looking for this Korean guy who's like a folk hero, like a man of the people, who's resisting the Japanese, who's like teaching Taekwondo to the Koreans so that they can defend themselves against the Japanese, and building like a resistance movement, has like an underground kind of like faction and stuff like that, right? He is in hiding, working as a gardener at a church. Not even the priest knows who he actually is, right? And so he's like deep in hiding. And one of his disciples gets cornered by the Japanese, and it looks like they're going to take him to jail or kill him or something like that. And so he has to break his cover, essentially. And so the Japanese are going to be coming for him. The priest, upon realizing who he is, wants to try to help and protect him because the priest is a foreigner. He's French, and his niece is the Anne Winton, who's the white woman in this film, and so she's also French, and they're living in Korea. And the priest and the niece feel very strongly about, you know, the moral righteousness of the Korean resistance movement, and so they want to help them. And so you get into this situation of like the priest has to make this difficult decision of, is he willing to basically open himself up to persecution from the Japanese by trying to hide this guy or let him escape? And that's what sets off this chain of events that becomes the narrative of the film. I don't want to say too much more than that. It's a really interesting movie because it's not a movie. And okay, I guess we're going to get into my review now. This is a 2K restoration, by the way. And I will say before I get deep into this, if you just want like a quick hit, if you want 5 minutes of the video and get out of here, if you liked the Skyhawk, which came out last year from Eureka, which I freaking loved, I loved that movie. And if you like King Boxer, and if you liked Lady Whirlwind, I think you'll really like this movie. It has very similar kind of narrative styles to those films because it's not like a single protagonist going on a journey movie. So let me get into my thoughts on this. Huang Feng is a real filmmaker. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say. I love Huang Feng, but what I say when I mean that is Huang Feng is not one of these people who's like, okay, here's a plot. Here's where we're going to put 6,000 fight scenes. We'll get a little set and we'll put the camera stationary right here and you guys will just beat the shit out of each other. Huang Feng is a filmmaker who like, he really, I mean, he didn't write the script, but there are narrative similarities across all of his films. So you have to believe that to some degree, he's interested in certain types of material and he gravitates towards them, and maybe he works with his screeners. I don't really know, but like Lady Whirlwind, especially Shaolin Plot, this film, they have this very similar narrative template where instead of having one character who has a mission or a journey and goes on it, and there's an antagonist, you go from point A to point B and the movie is over, you have groups of characters who have like relationships with one another, but are also individuals who have their own agency and their own motivations, and they're pursuing goals together and independently. And it's a very organic and natural style of narrative. The movement of the narrative here is fantastic. And I think that this ties into my thought of Huang Feng being like a real filmmaker, like a really thoughtful, intelligent person who spends a lot of time thinking about the details of character, scene, the film. What is the film? What is it about? What are they really trying to say? More so than like a lot of other old school martial arts filmmakers. And I'm not trying to say that other people aren't good. I'm not in any way disparaging anyone else. I'm trying to highlight his greatness. And so, you know, like there's the scene in this movie where the priest discovers that this guy is this resistance leader and not just the gardener for the church, right? In a lesser film, in a film that was more plot point driven, in a film that was not as thoughtful and considerate and unique and interesting, you would get that plot point out of the way and then you'd be on to another scene. In this movie, all kinds of events unfold basically in real time as a direct result of that revelation. You get these really fascinating philosophical conversations in this movie. Like the priest is talking about, like, I support what you're doing and your movement to liberate Korea, but also, you know, as Jesus said, you turn the other cheek, like, there shouldn't be violence. Like, you shouldn't resort to violence. You should let the meek inherit the earth and all this stuff. And the other guy's like, I agree with you, but there is a point at which we can no longer be tread upon. Like, at some point, if we don't fight back, we will just be squashed from existence. And they have this really interesting philosophical conversation. There's another point later in the movie where one of the characters has been imprisoned by the Japanese. I don't want to say who it is to avoid the spoiler, but the leader of the resistance movement guy has this really difficult decision to make. And there's this really interesting conversation between him, the Angela Mao character, the Carter Wong character, they're two of his kind of friends and disciples. His followers, his lieutenants, whatever you want to call them, where, you know, he's like, I have to turn myself in. Like, this person is in prison because of me. It would be morally unjust if I gave myself up. But they're like, but you're not just you. You are a figurehead for this movement. You're like a folk hero. You mean more than just who you are as a human. And they had this really interesting conversation about that. And there's just all these like scenes where like an event happens, there's a reaction to it. And instead of just cutting to the next scene or going on to the next fight or plot point, like, you follow that scene until it reaches a point of natural organic conclusion where it makes sense that we would move away from those characters. It's not just like boom, 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 boom. We have to hit all these plot points. We have 90 minutes. Let's go. Right? It's a very natural, organic film with like incredible characters. There's a shitload of fights in this movie, so you will not be disappointed. Sammo Hung is a fight choreographer. So if you love movies with shitloads of fights, if you're a big fan of martial arts, if you love Sammo Hung, if you love his choreography style, he gets a lot of fights in this movie. A lot of other people get. Angela Mao is just whooping the shit out of freaking everyone in this movie, and it is amazing and super entertaining. But it's just even the camera work. There's this like really amazing section of a fight scene where you have these two shots back to back. One of the shots it's Angela Mao fighting a Japanese guy, right? So one of the shots starts on Angela Mao. She and the Japanese guy run together and fight. The camera tips sideways, right? So it like kind of tips because a character falls down, so the camera tips. In the next shot, at the start of it, the camera is tipped sideways. The character stands up and the camera straightens up, and then the shot ends on the guy Angela Mao is fighting. So it's like this incredible perfect symmetry of like we start on Angela Mao, they come together, the camera tips back up, we end on the guy she's fighting. Like just like the attention to detail in the craft of filmmaking in this movie is just so good. And I watched this movie I think 3 times last week, and the third time I watched it, I was just going through it on VLC player. I ripped the disc onto my computer and I was going through the digital file, just looking at details of like how shots are put together and how scenes go from scene to scene and like how the editing is done. And like, it's just such a good movie. Like it's so well considered. It has a strong visual design. Like there's real world locations in this movie because this movie is like atypically serious and dark and grounded and philosophical for this kind of old school martial arts film, which you can see kind of the Bruce Lee influence here, right? Where like Bruce Lee takes like the old school martial arts thing, but he makes it about something real and philosophical and meaningful and like rooted in this sense of like solidarity, liberation, like this radical sense of resistance to the powers that are trying to oppress people, right? And stuff like that. And you can see them like taking that as inspiration. And but you have this kind of like sense of groundedness with these real world locations in this film. But the way that the real world locations are combined with the sets feels very like kind of organic and natural. It's not like, oh, we're out on the street doing a Steadicam shot and then we're doing the Shaw Brothers thing in like this bright, perfect studio with a camera on sticks. Like it's really well thought out for how the different pieces are put together. And like there are scenes when they're on the set, it's like a street set in a city. When they're on the set, like there's like the camera, there's one shot in particular I'm thinking of where the camera is like in a shop. You're looking through a window across the street into the shop across the street. So you get all these layers of the city. So it doesn't look like this plastic 2-dimensional set. It looks like you're in a real place. So even though you can tell it's a set, there's like a real effort here to blend it with the locations to create this organic sense of a space, right? And that attention to detail extends across every aspect of this film, and it's just so good. The music, I loved the music in this movie. It reminded me a lot of Kurosawa music, honestly, like especially early to mid 50s Kurosawa music. Not as much Masaru Sato. Masaru Sato is like maybe my favorite film composer ever. He did like Throne of Blood and a lot of those later Kurosawa movies. Fumio Hayasaka was Kurosawa's original, favorite composer who he worked with on every film. And then he passed away very young. I think after I Live in Fear, which is like 1955. So I think he did like Seven Samurai, Ikiru, Rashomon, like those movies. It reminds me of that era in like Kurosawa music. So that's pretty good, like overview of my thoughts on the film. Let's talk about the bonus material a little bit. There's an interview with Billy Chan, who is a stunt guy that's 21 minutes long. He talks about working with Shaw and working with Lau Kar-leung and like the differences between Lau Kar-leung and Sammo Hung as people he collaborated with, which that was really interesting to hear about. He said Lau Kar-leung is like really chill and he would like show up at 11 every day and everyone would, or 10 or whatever, like everyone would get time to kind of like sleep in or whatever, have their coffee, like there was no pressure. Whereas Sammo was like kind of more like professional and intense and like he would be there right on time and he would be like anxious to get everything done and like very focused and stuff like that. And he talks about Sammo's relationship with Huang Feng, which is really interesting to learn about, how they kind of worked together and stuff like that. He talks about he talks about Korean martial arts, actually, which is really cool too, and how he's like karate gets like a lot of attention, and like we all know karate is really cool, but like Korean martial arts are totally badass too, and they don't get as much attention in cinema. So with this movie, we were trying to like put some shine on that. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so the documentary. There's a martial arts movie documentary on here that's 91 minutes long, and it's like a talking head kind of narration. that's combined with clips from like dozens of movies that goes over the careers of like all the major players, like Bruce Lee, and then it talks about Sammo Hung, and you learn about Shaw Brothers and Golden Harvest, and like there's interviews with Sammo in the movie with Cynthia Rothrock, and like it's really freaking incredible. Now, if you're someone who has seen all of these movies and been watching them for years, and you know all about the history of them and stuff like that, there's probably not a lot that you're going to learn from this. It is cool to see all the clips. It's cool to see them put together as a documentary. This is the thing I was talking about where someone in my Facebook group right away was like, how does it look? Is it like HD? Is it this? Is it like really good? The talking head segments are a little blurry and grainy, but the clips look amazing. And they're like all very like HD. They look like they're taken from Blu-ray and stuff like that. But to me, like the real prize of this documentary is you have interviews from Sammo and Cynthia Rothrock that look like they're maybe from the early 90s, early to mid 90s. Sammo's in like an editing bay, like an editing room for film editing, and just talking about his process and his history and like how he got into Peking opera and then how he got into movies from there, and like how he approaches choreography and all the people he's worked with and stuff like that. And then the Cynthia Rothrock interview, there's other people interviewed. Those are the two that kind of like stood out to me as I was watching this, because it was really cool to see them. So if you're new to these movies, if you're like a recent fan of Hong Kong cinema, or if you just don't know, like, I mean, as of 6-7 years ago when I started doing this channel, I didn't know like a butt ton of stuff about the behind the scenes and the history. And I've learned a ton of that since I started doing this channel. But if that's all new to you, this will be like an indispensable thing to have. It's really fucking fantastic. So then you have a Sam Deegan commentary track. So Sam Deegan is an author and a film scholar who's very active on like Instagram and Letterboxd, and she does commentaries for Vinegar Syndrome a lot. I think she actually produces discs for Vinegar Syndrome. I really liked her commentary on, I believe it was Chinese Boxer. She did one of the Jimmy Wang Yu movies for 88 Films, and I really liked that commentary. There's some really interesting information in this commentary. She talks about, one of the things I thought was interesting is she talks about in movies how martial arts schools are often involved in like nefarious underground politics type of stuff, right? And she talks about like the history of that and the tropes of that, and like the different political movements that these schools are aligned with in different films and stuff like that, and how this plays into that kind of lineage in the films. She talked about Golden Harvest as like a place that very deliberately nurtured young and new talent in the industry, which I thought was a pretty interesting conversation. She talks about women in the film, and obviously it's, you know, it's good to have a woman doing a commentary track on a film which features Angela Mao, who is a woman, obviously, and Anne Winton is a woman, and like to have that kind of perspective on these films and talking about the roles of women in this film and in these films in general is always very interesting and a fresh perspective. So and I mean, it's a feature-length commentary. She talks about the cast and you know, who everyone is and what other films they had been in, and the director, and she talks about kind of the tropes of these types of films, and the way that they are worked into this film and how they differ and are similar to other films and stuff like that. So the movie is When Taekwondo Strikes. As I said, it was the perfect first Hong Kong movie of 2024 for me. Perfect first watch for Hong Kong for me for 2024. I loved this movie. If you watch this channel, you've heard me say that old school martial arts movies are like comfort food for me. And this is like the best kind of, like, I fucking loved this movie. It was so fun. I mean, I watched it again for fun after watching it twice, because I watched the movie, then I watched it for the commentary track. And then like a day later, after I ripped it on my computer, I was like, just look at When Taekwondo Strikes again. So I highly, highly recommend this film. If you're a fan of old school martial arts films, if you like Bruce Lee, if you like the other Angela Mao stuff like Hapkido, Lady Whirlwind, if you liked Skyhawk and King Boxers, one of my favorite Shaw films, I think there's a lot of similarities between this and that. If you liked Shaolin Plot, the other Wang Feng movie, definitely go and check this one out. My name is Will. You're watching Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. As always, we thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.